Hare Krishna. Delighted to be here, all of you today. And when I was in America a few months ago, I was at a conference of spirituality and mental health. And in the last few years, maybe last few decades, you could say 2-3 decades, but especially in the last decade, there has been an increasing recognition that mental health problems are increasing a lot. And spiritual methods are offering a lot of relief. So, broadly, we could say in terms of the reach, we could say it's like a funnel. Right now, the maximum research has been done in mindfulness. Then, and mindfulness, there are lots of studies show that it helps people to manage their mind. Then, after that, there is the research in meditation. And then, there is unfortunately very little research done on specifically on mantra chanting. So, now there are research done on chanting of Om or chanting of Gayatri Mantra. Hare Krishna Mantra also, some research has been done, but it's not a huge amount of research. But if you want to consider scientific research, there is a lot of evidence that all of these seem to improve mental health. That now what happens whenever something spiritual seems to help people, there are always people who are anti-spiritual, there are people who are atheistic or non-theistic. They try to disprove the results because it's a threat to their philosophy. And they have documented some researches which seem to suggest that where there are some spiritual practices and some spiritual belief systems actually harm people's mental health. And they tend to increase depression. And now, where did this happen? It is not so. What their argument is that spirituality actually is not always improve mental health, it can harm mental health also. And this is especially associated with places where, or those spiritual groups where, if you consider this is the mainstream society, and the society also has some moral standards. Now we may say that our society, people are materialistic, they have no moral standards. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it. In the West also, if you see, there is a lot of free mixing among the genders. But in many Western countries, especially in European countries, especially before there was immigration from the Middle East to Europe, there's very, very few rapes. So the idea was that not that people are sense-controlled, but people respect consent. That if a woman says no, no means no. You cannot force yourself on it. And that level of moral boundary is there. Now, we see, especially in the software world, there's a lot of free mixing on the genitals. And there are lots of affairs that happen premarital and extramarital. But in the software world, you will not hear rapes. Generally, rapes happen where people who come from rural places, where there is no sense of the value of consent. You know the word consent? Consent means some person says agrees. So there in the rural places, what happens is the male-female separation is largely geographical. Males work in particular areas, females work in particular areas. And now I'm not saying this rural as an Indian traditional, it's just rural psychology. That if a woman is publicly out free, that means she is free game. That is that. So everybody has certain moral standards. So now you may say, consent is not a high moral standard. Of course it is not. Dharma is the moral standard. But that is, the point I'm making is everybody lives within certain quarters. But the thing is that if a society has its moral standard very high above the general society moral standards. So if there is a religious group or a spiritual group whose moral standards are way higher than the general society's moral standards, then this creates, there's a huge distance, this creates a certain level of tension. Now, for example, there are certain Christian groups, the group called Amish, where they absolutely don't use any technology at all. So, let alone smartphones, they even don't have dial phones. So, they only have fixed phones in a few places in the entire community. And so now, when those people, their kids get exposed to mainstream society, it creates a tension. Now what happens if the moral standards of a particular group are very high as compared to the general society's moral standards? Now this tension can lead to a sense of guilt. And that guilt can lead to depression. So it is not the spiritual practices that are calling, it is not meditation or mindfulness or mantra chanting that is causing depression. What is happening? It is when there is a huge tension, and what happens if there is a certain social expectation that you should be living according to the standard. Most people come to spiritual groups in today's world, not necessarily for spirituality, they come for community. Modern society is quite lonely. And Western society, it may be polite, but it's not very personal. It is quite lonely. UK was the first country to create an official ministry for loneliness. A government ministry of Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs, they had a ministry for loneliness. And now they had a number of people who were in that ministry. And one of the key persons in that ministry eventually resigned because of loneliness. It's unfortunate, we laugh about it, but it's sad. The point, however, is something different over here. The point I'm making is that when people are lonely, they come to a spiritual group because they want a sense of community. They want a sense of belonging. Now, they do get that. But then, if that religious group has very high moral standards, and those moral standards, they feel that they are failing to stick to those, to live up to those moral standards. And now they think that everybody is expecting me to live accordingly, and if I am not able to live accordingly, then they feel not only guilty, there is the feeling of guilty, but they also feel even more guilty. Because what happens, they feel, I cannot talk with anyone about this. I just cannot talk with anyone. What will people think about me? And now they have left mainstream society, but they can't connect with mainstream society. They have joined a religious group, and they are struggling to meet the moral standards of that religious group. And then that guilt plus loneliness is a killer. It's a straight pathway for depression. It's a straight pathway for mental health problems. So basically, this was the problem that was in the spirituality and mental health conference. Out of this particular, so we had representatives from different groups. So we had, so I was representing the Indian tradition, you could say broadly Buddhism, but specifically Bhakti Yoga tradition. And then there were other groups, there were Christians, there were Jews, there were Muslims. And then they were saying, how can we address this? That we would like to offer mental health support to our community. But if this is a problem created by our own practices or our own principles, then how do we deal with this? So now, when this particular, so I made a presentation of that. So this is the context I'm going to get. I'll bring it to what is relevant for us. So generally speaking, in spiritual traditions, often what happens is desire gets, as they say, a bad press. Desire gets demonized. Desire is bad. Desire should be decreased. Desire should be eliminated. Desire should be destroyed. However, it's not that simple. If we consider the practice of bhakti yoga, the practice of sadhana bhakti, what is it meant to do? Let's look at what Krishna says himself in the Bhagavad Gita, the 12th chapter. The 12th chapter, first he says that you try to fully absorb yourself in me. If you cannot absorb yourself in me, then you practice sadhana bhakti. So let's recite this verse. Atha chittam samadhatum na shaknosi mayi sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mamicchatum dhananjaya. So what Krishna is saying over here is that the purpose of practicing bhakti, if you get fully absorbed in me, that's wonderful. But if you cannot be fully absorbed in me, then do abhyas only. Practice bhakti yoga. And the purpose of bhakti yoga is Mam Ichchaptum Dhananjaya. Get the desire for me. So desire is considered desirable over here. Now when we say it is desire for Krishna and it is spiritual desire, and we'll talk later about the difference between spiritual desire and material desire. But the point is, desire itself is not considered to be a bad thing. In fact, getting desire is considered to be a good thing. If you consider what differentiated Srila Prabhupada from many of his god brothers, Prabhupada was a grahastha who renounced the world at a little older age. Many of Prabhupada's god brothers, they were sannyasis, they joined the spiritual master bishop, their childhood, not their youth itself. They had a lot more association with spiritual master. So many of them were they had much more time to study Sanskrit and study the Gaudiya scriptures. Prabhupada himself, while traveling, studied extensively. Prabhupada went and trained all over India during the grahastha days, and that's the time that he was reading. So Prabhupada was well read, no doubt. Still, the point is that there were others who were, we could say, more renounced or more learned, learned in scripture, more learned in Sanskrit language and other things. What differentiated Prabhupada was that he had the strongest desire to fulfill his spiritual master's desire. That it was not that Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur instructed Prabhupada alone go to the West. No, he had told many of his disciples, a couple of his disciples, he had actually funded their mission to the West. But for others, he told them to go to the West. It was standing instruction in one sense for all his senior leaders. Now Prabhupada took that as his mission. So, if you see, in many ways, what differentiated Prabhupada's, so Srila Prabhupada's speciality, we could say, what made him special. There are many things we could say, but it certainly is not detachment. That he was more renounced than anyone else. That was not the point. It is his desire. Desire to serve Krishna, desire to glorify Krishna, desire to ultimately fulfill the prophecy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the point is, desire is not itself undesirable. So now, with respect to desire, let's explore this a little bit more. When we talk about this, how it works, I'll talk about two main concepts in the fold. See, there is desire as a feature of consciousness. Feature of consciousness means to be conscious is to be desirous. If we are conscious, then when we observe things, we'll find something attractive. We'll find some things not attractive. So, one feature of being conscious is having certain desires. So in that sense, desire is natural, necessary. It's a natural feature of consciousness. Now, desire can also be something more. So when I say feature of consciousness means, if you are the soul, then from the soul, when consciousness moves outwards, when the consciousness moves outward, then that consciousness will encounter various objects. And when it encounters various objects, some of them it will find desire. So in that sense, desire is a natural feature of consciousness. Now, desire can also be something more. Now, desire can be a force of the mind. Now, this is of what we often think of as desire. Now, what is the difference over here? If this is the soul, and from the soul, there is consciousness which moves outwards. And naturally, there will be desire. But we also have the mind inside us. So we have the soul, there is the mind, and then there is the body. And beyond the body, there is the outer world, where there will be various objects. So what happens? From the soul, when the consciousness goes outwards, it goes outwards. It goes outwards towards various objects. Now, when it goes outwards, the mind is not just a neutral transmitter of consciousness. The mind has certain conditions within it. And we will call these conditionings as impressions, as samskaras. Now, what happens? When these impressions are present, so these impressions transform the consciousness as we flow out. So if two people pass by a bar, maybe between their home and their workplace, or the students between their hostel and their college, there's a bar along them. Now, both of them may see the bar. Now, one of them has never drunk alcohol, has no interest in drinking alcohol. The other person has drunk a few times. Now, when from outside that sight of the alcohol or bar comes in, when for somebody there is no impression, if there is no impression, then what happens? It is just that same bar. This is the bar over here. So now if we have a bar over here, now if in the case of somebody who has no impression, the consciousness will just pass like that. It's just some information, okay, there's a bar over here. But for somebody who has some impressions, it reaches here and here suddenly expands. And then there's a bar here, it just fills the consciousness. It's like sometimes we have some small pop-up that comes up. And that pop-up, it is just there as a small pop-up. But if we click it, it becomes big. So now, in this case, we don't have to click it to become big. Just the impressions inside of it still make it big. So, in this way, what happens? The desires that they gain a force. And that force is a force of the mind. So a force of the mind means that the mind multiplies or expands the focus on that, and then we feel a pull for that. Now for somebody who has, so this is inward also, that means that's what consumes our attention. And after it consumes our attention, then from here, from the soul, then we flow outward, and then we will just go towards that. This is what I want. So the impressions in the mind create a force. So now what we want to do is consider desire as a feature of consciousness. Now this actually needs to be tapped. And desire is a force of the mind. This needs to be purified. So I'll explain what I mean by this. But At this point, I hope this point is clear, that desire is something innate to the soul. And that's why desire is not undesirable. But when the desire passes through the filter of the mind, the impressions of the mind, then it can go in undesirable directions. So desire itself is not undesirable, but desire can go in undesirable directions. So we can say desire, another way to compare it is, desire is like the power of sight. The power of sight is not a bad thing. It's necessary for functioning. But with the power of sight, we may see things which are impure, which are contaminating, which are agitating. So that power can go in undesirable directions. So with this understanding, now let's move to one more point. What we are discussing is that when can spiritual practices or something like spiritual practices lead one to an aggravation of mental health problems instead of a relief or a mitigation for mental health problems. So what happens? As I said, we tend to demonize desire at times. So now, if we consider desire itself, in general, when there is too much desire, this is associated with Rajoguna. And Rajoguna means, I want to eat this, I want to watch this, I want to buy this, I want to touch this. There's so many desires out there. Asha, pasha, shatair, baddha. Krishna says, hundreds and thousands of desires are pulling this. So this is Rajoguna. But actually, when there is too little desire, this will be Tamoguna. So too little desire is not necessarily goodness or transcendence. See, I'll talk about a very important difference. But one key point is, from an external perspective, Sattva Guna and Tama Guna can look very similar. One time I used to do a program in one place in Pune, and there's one person who would always come first for the class. But he would come first for the class, but he would never seem interested in the class. Never ask any questions, never respond to any questions, never respond to any interactive points. He came for 3-4 weeks. And then, one day after the program, I asked him, what inspires you to come so early? You come first all the time. He said, actually, my wife forces me to come here. But this wall at the corner of the wall is very comfortable. I want to catch it. So now you can come first. But that coming first is not because of spiritual eagerness. He is not coming to take shelter of Krishna, he is coming to take shelter of the wall. So what happens? In many ways, Rajoguna involves desire, Rajoguna involves energy, and Rajoguna leads to activity. So a person in Rajoguna will have a lot of desire and a lot of energy. So, Lobha pravrittir arambha karmana ashmaha spruha rajasyetani jayante vruddhi kunandana. In 14.12, the Bhagavad Gita Krishna says that the characteristics of Rajoguna are ashamaha spruha, the desire which cannot be pacified. And then because of that, what happens? Pravrittir arambha karmana. A person keeps doing more and more and more things. Karmana arambha. This, that. They keep doing lots of things. That's Rajoguna. So now, when there is Rajoguna, there is too much desire. But quite often, if we try to decrease desire artificially, then we may not necessarily rise to goodness. We will just go down to ignorance. Because the defining characteristic of mode of goodness is like if we consider 3 gunas. There's Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, what this means is that basically, in this particular case, what desire is what keeps us in Rajoguna. Now, generally, going upwards is difficult because it requires, in general, lifting anything up requires more energy, it requires more force. So, if desire is what is holding us in at the level of Rajas, and the desire goes away, then what happens? The person goes down to tamas. So, tamas means what? The person doesn't want to do anything at all. I just sleep in my bed for not just 6 or 7 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, and just up here and there, watch something. And even when we're scrolling, it's not that we are reading. Like, I don't want any exercise for my brain. So just watch something, move forward, watch something, move forward. You don't even know what you're watching. So the point is that if desire is decreased, it doesn't necessarily lead people to goodness. It can very easily get them down to tapas. And that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that Rajoguna can be a good thing for people who are in Tamoguna. That Tamoguna is like poison, and Rajoguna can be like the antidote for that poison of Tamoguna. That means, what do we mean by this? See, sometimes we talk about spirituality means we need to give up Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Tamo bhava, kama lobha tayascha. Go beyond both of those. And that's important. But that is the spiritual level. Now, after I started traveling to America, I started from 2014, 2015. And I spent a lot of time trying to do Western outreach, understanding the Western mind. So one big difference, the Indians are the wealthiest minority in America. We are the minority, but we are the wealthiest minority. And one reason for that is, Indians generally, in America, how do you know a person is successful? They have 5-6 parameters. How much is the income level of a particular group? How much do they depend on welfare? The government offers support. How much they depend on government support? How well are their children educated? How much is the criminality among this community? How many people commit crimes? How long do their marriages stay? So they have various sociological parameters, nothing spiritual. But among the sociological parameters, Indians are always, not just in the wealth they are at the top, but Indian children also do quite well academically. And one reason they say that Indians take parenting very seriously. Now, what do we mean by that? Now, in one perspective, there is the parenting can be quite Rajasic. Rajasic means you have to work hard, you have to come first, you have to do well in your life, you have to choose careers which will be lucrative. Don't just go after careers which you feel good about, but you don't earn anything right. There is that idea of the starving artist. Somebody becomes an artist, but they can't earn money out of it. So they're starving artists. So Indians often choose STEM fields, and there's a good career possible. So the thing is that we may call it as Rajasic parenting. And yes, that is true. But when I started going to America and talking with American people, I really understood what is Tamasic parenting. What is Tamasic parenting? Just give 2 examples of this. In America, the Western world is very conscious of physical safety. That means, if anybody has a heart attack, if you go to the hospital in the emergency, they won't ask any questions, do you have any money? First, we will save you. And even if the saving you requires a big amount of surgery expense, they'll do it. Consider life to be very important. In India, somebody might be dying when you go to the hospital, unless you pay money. So the thing is, they value life a lot. And their logic is that children are very tender. So small babies, if they're driving in a car, they're not allowed to sit on the mother or the father's lap. Because the idea is that if a car has a crash, then the baby's body is very tender. The baby will be killed. So there is a baby seat behind it. A special baby seat, it's like a fortified baby seat. Fortified means it's very strengthened. And if the baby is very small, then the idea is the baby seat is also turned backwards. That means what happens is, The baby is hit, there's a car crash from the front, and there's a backside which is protecting the baby. And the front side is very full. So there's a lot of protection. But what happened? 2-3 times it happened that the young mother or the young father or both, they got out of the car and they went away and forgot their baby was behind. So when this happened in California, the Californian government, they like the state we have state Sabha, like that Californian government, they said that all cars should have special sensors and special alarms that if the baby seat is occupied and all the doors are closed and the front seats are empty, then the cars will start beeping. So, many of the modern cars, if somebody tries to break the car, they don't have authorized key, and somehow they try to do something by which they try to open the car starts beeping. So it's like the car is being stolen. Like this, we should have a beeping sensor for it. So there was a critic of that. I said that, okay, for this, all cars you have to increase the expense. Because you have to have sensors behind, sensors ahead, you have to coordinate all the sensors, you have to have additional alarms. So there was a critic of this, another American senator, he said that, no, people who forget their children should forget the idea of having children. So, tamasic parenting means what? That you are not even aware. Like some people get stoned with drugs, and they're so stressed. There's one devotee told me that, especially in some communities in America, it's a significant number of children are born out of wedlock. There's only single parent, mostly it's mother. So the father is never in the picture. And then his mother, he said that when he was around 6, his mother started taking drugs. And he said from the age of 6 to 12, because I was practically taking care of my mother. So what happens is that America, they have food stamps. Food stamps means there are places where if you are poor and don't have a particular amount of money, then you get free food from there. So he said, I would go there and I would get food for my mother and I would take care of her. So now my mother was sometimes so stoned with drugs, and he can't really blame my mother because she was well educated and suddenly she had a relationship with someone and that person abandoned her and she got pregnant. Then she could not get a job thereafter. So whatever the reason, there could be a tragedy behind it. But the point he was making is many times my mother was not even conscious that I was existing. Whether I was present, I was living or not living, she was not even aware of that. Now, Rajasic parents, they may have no interest in spirituality. But if the child is sick, they will move heaven and earth to make sure that the child is treated properly. So, from the perspective of humanity's progression, just humanity's survival, the parents need to be at least Rajasic. The parents are tamasic. Then what happens is, they will just have no care for the children at all. So, Prabhupada writes in the Ajamil section that how, by nature itself, in all species, when a progeny is there, the child is there, offspring is there, there's a natural attraction between the parent and the offspring. So, this is Rajasic. But if the Tamoguna is there, even that natural attraction is not there. So, it can become terrible. So my point I'm making here is that we should not always demonize Rajoguna. And if Rajoguna goes away, then what comes is Tamoguna. It does not necessarily, if desires go away, then what results is very easily what can result is Tamoguna. And one of the most defining characteristics of depression, sometimes there is a general depression, there's clinical depression, and the word depression is sometimes overused. But broadly speaking, one universal characteristic of depression is the absence of desire to do anything. Okay, why take a job? Why work? Why do anything at all? Why go out? In the West, there is a group of people who are called incel. Incel is what? They are involuntary celibates. Involuntary celibates means what? They are so dysfunctional, they have no job, they don't take care of their health, they don't take care of their appearance, they're completely disorganized. So, no woman wants to even be with them. And so they don't want to be celibate, but they're involuntarily celibate. So now these people live mostly in Tamoguna. So the point I'm making is, again, the same point that if desire dies, then it's very easy to sink into Tamoguna. So the point is, when we are trying to come to Sattva-guna, so I talked about too much desire is Rajas, too little desire is Tamas. In between these two is Sattva. Sattva is determined by two characteristics. One is the selection of desire, not the rejection of desire, but the selection of desire. And then after that there is regulation of desire. So in the Tamoguna, in Rajoguna, what happens? There is domination of desire. Whereas in Tamoguna, there is elimination of desire. There is no desire only left. So a sattvic person, okay, a sattvic person may not have desire. Okay, I want to buy a big house, I want to get the latest phone, I want to do this, I want to do that. But that doesn't mean sattvic person has no desires. Sattvic person will have desires to, say, read books, gain more wisdom. So there are desires, and desires for understanding deeper truths or higher values of life. So for us, when we are trying to practice bhakti, it's important that we emphasize more the selection of desires than the rejection of desires. So bhakti is more about selecting desires. That, in fact, a serious devotee is defined by a serious desire to serve Krishna. That, okay, whatever happens, this is what I'm going to do. So now that brings us to the point of spiritual desire versus material desire. So now, what is the relationship between the two of them? So, at one level, how do we differentiate between spiritual and material? Like we say that, is this mic spiritual or material? What do you think?
Material.
Yes, depends on what it is used for. So, in terms of material structure, it may be material. Because the structure, what it makes of it, it is material. But it's used to share Krishna's message, it's become spiritual. So, the spiritual desire can have multiple levels. So, if you consider, spiritual, if I am here in this world, Krishna is here. Now, spiritual desire can be, we desire Krishna. That means, I just desire Krishna, I want to remember Krishna, I want to love Krishna, I want to serve Krishna. The gopis, they desired Krishna. When will Krishna come back? Shunyaitam jagat sarvam govindam. Now, this is at one level desire Krishna, that is spiritual desire. But another thing could be that there is desire for Krishna. What do you mean by desire for Krishna? Desire to offer things to Krishna. So I desire something so that I can offer it to Krishna. Now, what the thing may be, that can vary. But if Krishna is the ends, that ultimately I want to offer this to Krishna. So, is that a spiritual desire? Yes, of course. We have this wonderful center that has come over the last one year or so. And now this is a desire to have a center that Krishna's message can spread. So it is a desire for Krishna. For Krishna, for I means it is meant to be offered for Krishna. So now when we have a desire for Krishna, so the idea is the soul is here, around the soul the mind is there, around the soul the body is, around the body is there, and then beyond that there are the world with its objects. This is the self. And above this is Krishna. So what happens at one level, the pure devotee is that when the soul itself is offered to Krishna. This is the purest level, where the heart and soul is offered to Krishna. The next level is the mind is offered to Krishna. Now what is the difference between offering the soul and the mind? That means my mind is going here and there, but I fix it on Krishna. The next level is I offer my body to Krishna. So Krishna talks about this in 12.8, 12.9 and 12.10. So 12.8 is what? Mayeva mana, that's so my buddhin niveshaya, nivasishyasi mayeva ata urdhvam na samshaya. So the heart and soul is offered to Krishna, such a devotee lives in Krishna. If he cannot do that, then what happens? Krishna says, you offer your mind to me. Ata chittam samadhatu na shakanosi maisthiram. Abhyasa yoginto mamichhaptam dhananjaya. So you offer your mind to me. Now if you cannot offer your mind to me, then you offer your body to me. Now what do we mean by, another way to understand this is, this is the state of samadhi. Samadhi is where our heart and soul completely is offered to Krishna. This is the stage of sadhana, where our mind is offered to Krishna. This is the stage of seva, where we use our body in Krishna's service. Now, beyond this is also where we offer the objects of the world to Krishna. Now, this is also at one level a form of seva. So, for example, some people may not want to physically come and do some seva. Okay, clean the temple, serve prasadam, cook for Krishna. They'll say, okay, I want some money, I'll give the money to sponsor a Sunday feast. So what is happening? They are offering the money to Krishna. So the idea is, at some level, connection explodes. Connection is developed for Krishna. So now we can say that the innermost connection is the best. That is true. But we also know that there are three levels of devotees: Uttamadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, and Kanishthadhikari. The topmost devotee, the middle level devotee, and the preliminary starting devotee. So what happens is, those who are Uttamadhikaris, their heart and soul is offered to Krishna, and they just don't care for the world. They're completely immersed in Krishna. So the Uttamadhikaris have to come down at the level of Madhyamadhikaris. Because then they'll say, okay, this person is devotee, this person is not a devotee. This is how we can help them to come to Bhakti. So we could say that Prabhupada was completely absorbed in Krishna when he was in Vrindavan. When Prabhupada went to America, that was because he wanted to offer the world to Krishna. So, simply saying that, okay, that is the highest and everything else is lowest, it's not that simple. The idea is that there are multiple ways in which we can serve Krishna. And what we want is, ideally speaking, that as many ways in which our power of desire can be directed towards Krishna, we need to do that. So, if our heart and soul will be offered, it's wonderful. But we want to offer our mind's creativity, we want our body's energy, we want to offer the resources that we have in the world also to Krishna. Now, if we consider the example of Yudhishthira Maharaj. Yudhishthira Maharaj, what did he do? Say, Krishna is here. Now, he, in one sense, he offered the world to Krishna. How did he offer to the world to Krishna? Through the Rajasuya Yajna. Now, to do the Rajasuya Yajna required a lot of effort. And that effort, we could say, was material. He had to send his 4 brothers and they went in different directions and fought with various kings. And most of them, they didn't have to fight. They subordinated him. They accepted Vishnu's position. And then they submitted him. Then the yajna was performed. So now, when he offered something that glorious to Krishna, the result of that was Krishna's claims. He was able to, because he was the Vishnu Samrat, that's how he could do the Agra Puja for Krishna. Now, of course, that level of involvement with the world also comes at a cost. And then, when we are going to offer something from the world to Krishna, what can happen is that we get so caught in the world that we forget to offer it to Krishna. So, I was talking with one devotee, he said that, Prabhupada said you should give 50% of your salary to Krishna. He said, I want to give 90% of my salary. But I'll give 90% once I start earning $1 million every month. Until then, till then I want to use every single dollar that I have to get to that level. So till then, I cannot give any charity.
Now what is going to happen this way?
This way. Now, in trying to offer that desire might be sincere also. But the problem is, in trying to earn $1 million per month, what will happen is the person is going to get entangled in the material energy of loss. And if they are already entangled in the material energy, what will happen is that, I was telling this to one Prabhupada disciple, he's quite sarcastic. He said that what will happen is that the bank balance will increase, but the person will feel, I never have enough balance to give to Krishna. So, because what you feel is, I want more. So the thing is, how much of the world can we offer to Krishna? That is something each one of us has to be very honest about it. So again, the point we're discussing is that there is selection of desire. That all desires are not bad, but we need desires in the world. Desires to offer the world to Krishna. So if somebody has singing ability, then they desire that I want to sing very nicely and offer my singing ability. Somebody has speaking ability, somebody has decorating ability. So we want to offer that ability to Krishna. And that involves engaging with the material world to some degree. But the point is, how much do I engage with the material world? So this now, I talked about the importance of desires in bhakti, and that we select desires. What does mean selecting desire means? That if what is happening is the desire actually going to take me towards Krishna? Or what happens is, the desire, I get trapped in the desire. It doesn't go anywhere else. So I just stay there. So this is not healthy. So which desire can I offer to Krishna? That's a selection has to be there. And then even when we are selecting the desire, there has to be regulation of the desire. Regulation means when you want to offer something to Krishna. So, okay, let's take a mundane example, then we'll come to spiritual example. Suppose parents tell a child, you should do well in your school, you should come first in class. And the child is not doing very well. One day the child comes, Mommy, Daddy, I came first in class. Oh, wonderful, how did you do that? The child says, I worked very hard to learn computer hacking. I hacked into my teacher's computer. And I got all the questions beforehand. And I already knew the answers, and that's why I came first. Now, what do the parents say? The parents say shabash, then somebody else will tell the parents badmash. The idea is that the ends are important, but the means are also important. Okay, you want to come first in class, but what is the way by which you are coming first in class? Suppose some devotee says somebody wants to build a big temple. We don't have enough Lakshmi. We've got some donations. Maybe we've got we need 1 crore. You are 10 lakh right now. So, going to people and getting money from them is very difficult. So what I'll do is, this 10 lakh, I'll invest in stocks. And we'll make it to 1 crore. And then, once it becomes 1 crore, we'll build a temple. Now, we invest in stocks. What will happen is that 10 lakh will become 1 crore, that is more likely, 10 lakh can become zero also. Isn't it? So, now is building a temple by investing in stocks and getting involved in stocks. Is that a healthy thing to do? Well, it depends on what kind of stocks it is. Investment, like there is speculative stocks, in stock broking, not all action in stock market is gambling. See, it depends on the key principle in gambling is what? That we want returns without efforts. But there are some long-term stocks and they have performed a long time over here. The devotees also stockbrokers. And they do a fair job. It's not that they have to give up that job just because they are, just because they become devotees. But the point is that speculation like that is not healthy. So if somebody says that the ends are important, but the means are also important. So even when we are pursuing some desire, the desire needs to be regulated. The regulation, there is a selection of desire and the regulation of desire. So what does this mean for us in terms of where we are right now? Like for us, when we are practicing bhakti, we can focus on reducing material desires. But if we focus on this, we will sooner or later start feeling suffocated. Oh, I'm a devotee, I should not do this. I'm a devotee, I should not do this. I should not do this. Now, if we keep reducing material desires, that's what is our focus. What is our focus in bhakti? Or if we have some rajoguna, we'll feel suffocated. If we have tamoguna, we won't feel suffocated. We will actually become stagnated. We will not move anywhere. In tamas. So now what we want to do is, the focus is not on reducing material desires. This is not the thing. The focus is on strengthening spiritual desires. The strengthening spiritual desires is that I desire Krishna and I desire for Krishna. So the idea is, that is what we need to focus on strengthening. And there could be many things. Most of you are young now. So, in youth, it's natural to have desires. That's just how biology, psychology is wired. Now, for some people, the desires may not go on even when they grow old. And that's because of artificial triggering of desires by the media and the culture. But in general, people think about desires. So Prabhupada directed the desires spiritually among his disciples. He told them, when he came back in 1968, he had got a severe health challenge and he had to go to India, or come to India. Then he went back to America in 1968. At that time when he went back to ODC, they had got a globe. And Prabhupada told his disciples, all of you pick one country and go and deliver that country. Now, this one Mataji was there, she was 18, 19 years old. Prabhupada, what about us girls? Prabhupada said, we are not boys or girls. We are souls. You also pick up one country. And Prabhupada had so much spiritual desire within him that he, just by associating with him, just by hearing him speak, devotees would get infected by that spiritual desire. And for Prabhupada, Krishna was not some theory to be proved or realized in the future. For Prabhupada, Krishna was a living loving person. And those who were with Prabhupada, they felt that, that Krishna is here, and if we try to serve him, Krishna will help us. So if we try, so that sense of the reality of Krishna, or if it's not the reality, the realness of Krishna. That sense of the realness of Krishna, and not just a remote realness, but the immediate realness of Krishna. That Prabhupada had the capacity to infuse in devotees. And by that, then they naturally had a desire for adventure, a desire for doing extraordinary things. And Prabhupada encouraged them to do that for Krishna. So when the devotees were following the regulative principles, when the devotees were, when they were doing various things in Krishna's service, it was not that their desire was eliminated. So Rajoguna, this is the last point I will make, and then we will have question answers. We will talk about three gunas: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. There are two ways of looking at these gunas. One is in a moral sense, and the other is in a functional sense. What do you mean by this, moral and functional? Moral means that Sattva guna is better than Rajoguna, Rajoguna is better than Tamoguna. And if you want to live morally, people in Sattva guna will be able to live more morally. If you want to grow spiritually, Sattva guna is more favorable. Tamoguna is not that favorable. And that's true. But then Krishna also says that, so there are many places Krishna says transcend the modes or rise to a higher mode. But then Krishna also says that the material world is made of the three gunas. Daiviyesha gunamaya. So from a functional perspective, the material nature is made of the three modes. So in Ayurveda, they do analysis of your modes. And the ideal analysis, the ideal composition in terms of the gunas is 33% of each mode. 33% sattva, 30% rajas, 33% tamas. So now, I recently had some health challenges, so I did some analysis. They said that, they told me that, there's a problem. Since you have only 7% tamas. That's a good thing, isn't it? He said, no, that's not a good thing. I said, no, the Tamoguna is to be removed. He said, that's when I was introduced to this concept and I started reading more about it, talking with devotees. So you see what happens is, each of the modes has its function in the mode. So for example, when we try to sleep, so one of the things that has been happening for me is I'm not getting sleep at all at night. So now what happens when we go to bed or lie down wherever we go to sleep, what happens at that time? That tamas has to come upon us. If tamas does not come, see, it's like, there are entire books written about the philosophy of sleep. So what is the philosophy of sleep? But Vedanta talks about it also quite a bit. The point is that the shift from the waking state to the sleeping state, that is actually not in our control. We can create the situation for the shift. That means, we can lie in a comfortable bed, we can have silence around us, we can have darkness around us, we can create the situation for it. But the actual turning of the switch, like a particular moment where we move from the waking state to the sleeping state, that turning off of the switch is actually not in our control. And if Tamoguna is not enough, then what happens is, the mind either stays in Rajoguna. Generally, Sattva is too far away at that time. So does it go to Sattva? Like there's one person, one author, he just had a lot of insomnia. And he put it humorously. He said, my bed is the magical place where as soon as I lie down, my mind reminds me of all the things I did not do during the day.
And then it just becomes almost impossible to sleep.
Oh, this did not happen, and that did not happen, that did not happen. So the point is that in terms of sleeping, when that tamoguna comes, that's when the mind switches off. Otherwise the mind is constantly active. So there is the contemplative mind, that is in sattva-guna. The active mind is in rajoguna. And the inactive mind is in tamoguna. So each of the gunas is important. One time I was in Pune and I was supposed to go to Mumbai. So this last month one devotee from Mumbai had called me, can you get this? So I was going by train, it's many years ago, 20 years ago. So I had called one devotee that, can you get this? I had already left for the train. So that devotee said, yeah. So he came to the airport, I was calling him phone, when are you reaching, when are you reaching? And he came to the whistle had already been blown. So he came to the railway station, was just walking very gently. I said, bro, please come with me, the train may leave. He said, I want to be sattva-guna.
Now, yes, thinking sattva-guna is good, but ultimately, we have to get the job done, isn't it? Whether it is for serving Krishna, or whether it is for doing whatever you have to do. If somebody is in emergency duty in a hospital, and they say, I want to be sattva-guna, and then you can't be in emergency duty. People may die for a few moments delay. So the point is that for functioning in the world, certain gunas are required at certain times. Some activities just need to be done fast. And now we say, oh, you can be fast in sattva-guna also. Well, yes and no. So there's a difference over here. See, although sattva-guna, rajoguna, tamoguna can be 30-35%, that's the ideal. But just because their percentage is the same does not mean that they are equally influential in a person. Like a person can be in sattva-guna. That means they make their decisions, their major life values are determined in sattva-guna. But still, for them to function in the world in a balanced way, they need to have all three gunas. So it's like when a person's guna is determined, whether it's sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, that is determined not just by, how much time they spend in which guna. That's important. But the important thing is, in which guna they make their biggest decisions. If somebody decides, they drink a lot and they decide, I want to invest money over here. Or I want to marry this person, I want to divorce this person. They're taking all such decisions in tamoguna, then that person is tamasic. So the idea is that none of the gunas need to be demonized. We don't want to be controlled by any guna. We don't want to be taking our major decisions in the lower gunas. But from the compositional perspective of the material world, all three gunas are important. So there is the presence of the gunas and there is the influence of the gunas. So we want to be influenced primarily by the higher gunas, by sattva-guna. But all the gunas are naturally present. And like biologically, we say that 8 hours of the day, say 9 to 5 is in tamoguna, or 8 to 4 is in tamoguna, and then 4 to 10 is in sattva-guna, and 10 to 8 is in rajoguna. That can have some time-wise distribution of that. But the point is, in nature also, out of 24 hours, 8 hours each in each of the modes. So the thing is that for us, I need to function in a way that works for me. So if we are chanting, and again I said that there's a great shortcut from sattva-guna to tamoguna. So I will never ever get up when I'm chanting. I only sit and chant. Yes, I sit and chant and I sit and nap. Few mantras I sit and chant, few mantras I nap, few mantras I sit and chant. Now, what are we doing when? Only Krishna knows. So now, of course, if we can have the sufficient sattva-guna, excellent. But if we don't have, if we are sliding into tamoguna,
then what happens is it is better to bring some Rajoguna. Rajoguna would be maybe walk and chant, maybe stand and chant, maybe pace and place itself. You just move your legs over there wherever you chanting. Bring some energy and activity by which at least the Tamoguna condition can move. So overall, for all of us, when we are talking about managing our desires, so our topic was mind and managing the mind and making our mind our friend, not letting our mind be our enemy. What it means is one of the key forces in the mind is desires. And not all desires can be controlled. Not all desires can be removed. So there are many aspects to mind management, but one of the aspects of mind management is that we need to channel our desires. So what I said over here, that reducing material desires and strengthening spiritual desires. So strengthening spiritual desires is what happens by abhyasa. And reducing material desires is what happens by vairagya. So in one sense, both are important, but if there's only vairagya without abhyasa, that will not be sustainable. So these two both going together. Abhyasa means there's a higher direction for our desires. And vairagya means there is the decrease of the lower direction. So now both are there, that is the best. So it's like there is a push. Okay, let's put it this way. There is a pull to Maya. And then that will decrease to vairagya. And then there is a push to Krishna. And that will increase with abhyasa. So we want to decrease the pull towards Maya and increase the push towards Krishna. But the primary thing is, you want to increase the push towards Krishna. And by that, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatya Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chedavetkam. So let's summarize. That we talked about mind management, and within that, our key focus was on desire management. So within desire management, we talked about three main things. Started by talking about the concept. The concept was what? Desire is itself a feature of consciousness. To have consciousness means you will always have desires. You cannot have any kind of consciousness without desires. Now, desire can also be a force of the mind. And when that happens, then we need to regulate that. So if I consider the soul, from the soul, the consciousness that comes out will always have some desire. Now, that soul's consciousness comes through the mind, and in the mind there are impressions. And that's where the desire can get distorted. So the point is, desire itself is not undesirable. In fact, desire is desirable. As Krishna said, the purpose of sadhana bhakti is mamucha in the nature. We started with that particular one, the concepts. Then, with respect to that, in terms of insights, so what I talked about was three main things I talked about in this. That with respect to desires, there can be too much, which will be rajas. Too little will be tapas. So the characteristic of spirituality is not necessarily just the elimination of desire. Characteristic of spirituality is the elevation of desire. We have higher desires. So there is selection, we select, we direct, we regulate. Selecting, these are the desires I want to have. And these are the desires I want to direct towards Krishna. And then by directing towards Krishna also, how far can I go? So we discussed the example of how, if Krishna is here above me, and after Krishna, so there's the soul, and there's the mind, and there's the body, and then there is the objects in the world. So we want to have as many channels towards Krishna as possible. The soul offered to Krishna is, heart and soul offered 12.8, then 12.9 is the mind offered to Krishna. Then let's put it this way. The mind offered to Krishna.
the body offered to Krishna is Seva. The body offered to Krishna is also, and then there are two levels described. Yeah. So the idea is that
now how much can we do? Which objects can be offered? That will depend on our adhikar. We're trying to give an example with Yudhishthira Maharaj, he could offer certain things. No, if we try to offer certain things, people get entangled.
But for us, the takeaway, the key point was that if you consider the gunas, there is a moral way of looking at them and there is a functional way of looking at them. So in a functional way, for functioning in the world, all three gunas are required. Tamas is also required, Rajas is also required, Sattva is required. But within the functional, so you can say the gunas, in terms of presence, all need to be present. But in terms of the influence means which is the more influential guna. For that, we want the higher gunas. We want the higher mode is ultimately want to be connected with Krishna and want to offer everything to Krishna. So when we are trying to cultivate desires, our bhakti focus, it is not so much on saying, it's not on reduction of reduce desire. Even if you say it's material desire, reduce material desire, that is important and that should not be the focus. It is strengthen spiritual desire. And once the spiritual desire is strengthened, then automatically material desire will fall in place. And here I started by discussing about how this too little desire can lead to tamas, and this is where depression can come out. And that's how sometimes spiritual practices, if misunderstood or misapplied, can lead to mental health problems. Now, without spiritual practice, one can get into addiction also. But too much desire will be addiction. So, select, redirect, and regulate. So that is what we learn to do in Bhakti. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for such a wonderful class, Prabhu. It was very deep and profound. Many things to learn. And it's my personal case also. I can understand how difficult life becomes if you don't get proper sleep. I also suffer from sleep disease since my early childhood. And I can sleep. Yeah, but it becomes very difficult.
So sometimes, a compliment becomes a problem.
So, because I have seen over the years that you are very thorough in your research and analysis, so I just wanted to ask a simple question that are there some spiritual and practical ways so that we can regulate our sleep or induce sleep in a way that we can serve Krishna in a better way? It's generally the other way around, but this is my humble question and my sincere prayers to the Lord, go to sleep, so that you can get more and more better sleep.
See, I've also tried to find it. It's not easy. Every mind is like a child. Like I was telling in the previous class, that a parent may read a lot of parenting books about how to take care of a child. The child is crying, how to pacify them. But when their child is crying, no parenting manual will work. Each parent has to work out how things work with their child. So like that, everyone has to work with their mind. So I was recommended Shavasana, I was recommended this, I recommended that. So the only thing that has really helped me till now is it told me that, okay, you hear some soothing music, you hear some nature sound, you hear some Krishna Kirtan. So the only thing that has helped me to really till now, and also doesn't work all the time, is like hear very serious philosophy. So when I'm serious philosophy, it's like to understand the philosophy and lying down on bed, if I'm hearing Krishna Katha, it's like I feel intellectually underemployed. So when I'm hearing serious philosophy, I go into some, maybe this is just by understanding how it works, otherwise it doesn't always work. It's like at that time, because the philosophy is so serious, intricate concepts, analytical and all that, so I am forced with Sattva-guna. So actually the Rajoguna goes away from me. And then if I'm lying down in bed and it is dark and I'm hearing the philosophy, no, Sattva-guna, sometimes I'm lying down with Tamu-guna. And that's how I'm able to sleep. So I think everyone has to find out. I have still not been able to see any one way that works every day. So it's like, what my realization is, now once you start doing a service regularly, like say if I now every day I give 2-3 classes or at least 1 class. So now we pray before a class. But because I give so many classes, you don't always feel the need for Krishna's mercy. We know, theoretically we know we need Krishna's mercy. But we don't feel the need for Krishna's mercy. So what I've realized is that throughout the day I don't feel the need of Krishna's mercy, but every night I need Krishna's mercy. So it has become like that. So I think each of us has to find out how to do that with our own mind. Thank you for your answer. Actually, but that we all get good sleep. It's not a trivial thing. That if sleep is not there, from a biological or neurological perspective, most of the intellectual capacity of the brain that is rested and rejuvenated during sleep. So what they say is that there is this, now this is from a modern scientific perspective, there's something called REM sleep, rapid eye movement, there is deep sleep. So the amount of time we enter the REM sleep, that is the primary time when our intellectual faculties are rested and rejuvenated. And people who don't get REM sleep, they are the people who end up getting brain degenerative diseases. So there is, unfortunately, I have seen a number of Prabhupada disciples are getting Alzheimer's, they're getting Parkinson's, not Alzheimer's, but Parkinson's. And one of the main reasons is lack of sleep. So it's not easy. Sometimes people say, I want to work hard for Krishna, and that is good. Now, it's not that, okay, just doesn't mean, okay, I need to sleep 8 hours so that I will never get Parkinson's. Well, throughout our life, we are doing nothing, we will be living as if we have Parkinson's. So, we should live fear of diseases for the future. But it is unfortunately true that the brain degenerates faster if a person does not get adequate sleep. Now, of course, for some people there can be exceptions. But in general, regulating our life in such a way that we can sleep well, that's important. Now, how practically you can do that, it's not easy to decide that. It's not easy to determine. Thank you, Prince, for your answer. The first technique that you told, reading philosophy, that was 14 years back, I tried. And 4 or 5 hours hearing the lectures in the bed and then going to sleep. Anyways, thank you, Prince. There's no, as I said, no surefire way. Okay, please.
Really, one thing is, like in youth, there are some very common desires for everybody, like the desire for fame, sexual desire. This is very common in all the areas, of course. In Bhakti, when we come to know that, especially the desire for fame, sexual desire, these are like morally in the spiritual organization. It's a very like down-to-earth things. And we hear, especially in Bhakti tradition, we hear Trinada Krishna, very highlighted. So to control a desire for fame, it becomes sometimes a mental gymnastic. Oh, I'm feeling proud, or this seva will make me proud, so I will not do this seva much. Better I will do that seva which I am more not in light. And it becomes a more kind of a mental gymnastic. Oh, some proud thought comes, and we think that, oh no, my spiritual master told then why am I doing something? Similarly, sexual desire also. Like, okay, I saw this mother, okay, maybe I will block my eyes while entering the office. say any little sight of any lady, it simply whether it really agitates us or not, but that thought itself may make a person very agitated. So sometimes it becomes a lot of suffocation. So can you please tell that how to deal with these two types of desires?
I have no desire to answer this question.
So when you there are certain desires like fame and say sexual desire, and we fight against them because of our spiritual standards, then we may feel suffocated.
Yeah. See, with respect to desire management, that there could be two ways of looking at it. One is a digital way of looking at it. The other is an analog way of looking at it. Now, what do I mean by digital analog? Where you know this is right, this is there's one level is right, everything below it is wrong. It's one or zero. The analog is more that it's like a scale, it's a range. And in the range, or a scale we can say, there is an aspirational level. And then there is a non-negotiable level. So now, aspirational level could be in a plan approach, apply to anything. Say for example, our aspirational level might be that, okay, every day I want to wake up at this time, I want to complete all my sadhana by this time, and then I'll have my whole day. It's aspirational level. It's good to be at the aspirational level. But if we can't be at the aspirational level, that doesn't mean we have to go down this group and I cannot do this today. It's a non-negotiable level. So there's a particular level of sadhana that we need to do. That's a non-negotiable. So what happens is, if we think of spiritual life simply as this is right and anything below this is wrong, then there's a lot of suffocation. But if we have this range approach, and the suffocation comes even more if we try to be at the aspirational level in every field. Aspirational level is that I'll wake up very early in the morning and I'll be aspirational level in my sadhana, I'll be aspirational level in my preaching also. So ready to ask questions till late night I'll be there because I'm extending myself for service. Then, if we try to be at the aspirational level in all areas, we will completely burn ourselves out. So that's why, if we have that range approach, then, okay, this is a level below which I cannot go. Maybe I want to read Shastra every day. And it's good if I can read every day. But if I can't read every day, in the weekend or sometime, I find some time and I read substantially at one time. It's also good. So, like that, this aspiration level is non-negotiable. So, each one of us, when we are trying to manage any desire, that range approach has to be there. So with respect to fame, for example, how might we apply this approach? That is, at a aspirational level would be that whenever we do any service, we remember that I'm doing this service for Krishna, and the ability to do this service comes from Krishna. Whatever success I get, whatever recognition I get, it is all from Krishna. And then we consciously also offer it to Krishna. Krishna, this praise, this glory, it's all for him. The aspirational level would be that it's almost everything what we are offering and what we are getting, what we are offering, and everything is Krishnaized. Now that would be an aspirational level. Now a non-negotiable level, at a basic level, when we are able to achieve some success, at least with what is Krishna's mercy, the achieve this. Devotees are mercy, Krishna is mercy, Guru Krishna. Now we speak that and we try to meet that message. So now, how much as devotees should we consciously try to avoid fame? It's a difficult question because yukta ahara viharasya, as we say, that what is regulated, what is appropriate for everyone will vary. I guess somebody is more of a Brahminical nature. Now, for that person, they'll just be happy in studying. If they get some fame from the study, that's nice. But somebody has a little bit more Kshatriya nature. For them, fame is a need. That it is a natural thing. In fact, with this, in the Dhruva time, it is said that what is that? Aho Kshatriya Tejasam Mana Bhangam Amrishana. That Narad Muni says that how great is the effulgence of the Kshatriyas that they cannot tolerate dishonor. Mana Bhangam Amrishana. And he's appreciating that. He's saying that Dhruva could not tolerate dishonor. And that's why now a small 5-year-old child has left his home and come to the forest and search for God. So now he was not interested in God, he was interested in the kingdom, but still he came to search for God. So the point is that different people, each individual is different. And we have to find out what level helps us to focus most on Krishna. So it's not like with respect to food. How much food should somebody eat? Some people may be satisfied with 2 chapatis, some people may 10 chapatis. And the point is not how much chapatis we eat, it's what do we do after eating the chapatis? Do we have energy for serving Krishna? Or do we feel we are heavy and bloated? Or are we feeling completely starved and famished? So, Bhima had a huge appetite. Raghunath Goswami had really 0 appetite. But both had enormous energy for serving Krishna. Now you can say, yes, Raghunath Goswami is an exalted soul. That is true, no doubt. But does that mean Bhima is not an exalted soul? Not necessarily. So at one level, the body mind, this is just a machine. And each machine will work in its own way. So, with respect to just like how much food is appropriate for a person, that person has to decide. So the key principle is that food should not become a competitor for our attention when we are trying to offer our attention to Krishna. So if the food is too little, it will become a competitor. If the food is too much, it will become a competitor. When it is appropriate, yukta, then it will no longer be a competitor. So like that, how much should we sleep? Like some people have said, less sleeping is not good. There are people who are living with 4 hours sleep, but they've never had any health problems. So the body, different people, the bodies are different. And we can't really say how much is the right amount. Each person has to decide how much is the right. It will determine back how they function in life. So that's why if somebody needs a little more recognition, and then they seek some services which involve some level of visibility, some level of fame, and then they seek it, I don't think that should disqualify them from practicing bhakti. Now, there's also a difference between appreciation and glorification. Many times the word fame we use in a very general sense. So for example, if somebody has done a valuable service, or if we have done some service, then wanting appreciation is not the need of the ego, it's just the need of the heart. So, for example, if we decorate the deities, or we organize, cook some food, then we cook some nice delicious food, and then somebody comes and appreciates. Maybe the community leader or some city devotee comes and appreciates. Hey, you did this very well. Now that can be very encouraging for us. Now the difference is, why are you telling me, take this mic and tell everyone? That is glorification. So appreciation is the need of the heart. That is what I am doing is valuable, is worthwhile, is useful. That we all have a need to be needed. That what I'm doing is of some value. And when that is recognized, then we feel more connected. So I think that is perfectly fine. Now, whether that glorification, that depends. So I think we have to manage it accordingly. And even with respect to sexual energy, I won't go to the specifics. But the idea is just like there is prasad, there's food. Now there is food that is offered to Krishna. Food that is cooked, that is harvested by devotees, that is transported by devotees, that is cooked by devotees, offered by devotees. So in the association of devotees, that's honored. It's like the highest level of it. Now from there, if somebody is living in a country where there is, or then whatever the situation, they just can't get proper food. They're not able to cook. Maybe somebody has a job. If somebody is a medical intern and they have to work 20 hours a day, or sometimes they have to work for 24 hours, 21 hours, and 2 hours a day. Now they have no time for anything. They barely manage to do their basic stuff. If they're not able to cook at that time, they might get whatever food they get, and they might offer it in the mind to Krishna, and they take that food. Now, is that a good standard? No. But is that breaking the regular principle? No. So just as with the food, there's a whole range. From this to this. Then we can always try to go for a higher thing. But like there's aspirational and then non-negotiable. So sometimes the sex is just a bodily function, just like eating. Now, of course, it is much more consequential in terms of what happens. So that consequentiality has to be recognized. But at another level, it's just a biological function. So there's no need to fixate on it so much. It's like somebody may fixate on it that materialistic people fixate on sex in terms of fulfilling it. Spiritual people can fixate on sex in terms of avoiding it. And you make the whole standard, we define our whole spiritual life by our capacity to avoid sex. No, the essence of our spirituality is how much can we remember Krishna and how much can we serve Krishna. So now, okay, so there is a range over there. That's why there are different ashrams and various facilities are there. Various levels are there. So again, aspirational to non-negotiable level. Each one of us has to find that. And then one situates oneself accordingly. So from sex only for procreation to sex within marriage. That's like offering like completely pure environment food to offering food to Krishna. So it's a range. And within that range, each person has to situate themselves where they can and move ahead in their life. Last question, sir.
Thank you very much for this wonderful class. If you see the creation of 24 elements, there the mind got created in goodness, the intelligence was in passion. But in real world it seems opposite.
Okay. Why is it that the mind comes from the mode of goodness and intelligence from the mode of passion? Well, there's a 3-level answer to it. So I will not go into all the 3 levels in detail. Because that's how Sankhya philosophy is very technical. What happens is, we don't really understand the Sankhya worldview. This one thing that stands out. Why does this make sense? So the simplest way to understand it is that goodness is associated with maintenance. Sattva is associated with maintenance. And the mind maintains our material existence. Mind maintains our material existence means, okay, eat this, watch this. The mind basically gives us, proposes desires according to what we have desired. Right? Okay, you ate this, you watched this, you bought this, you drank this, now do this more. So the mind maintains our material existence. But now Rajas is what creates. Rajas is what expands in this sense. So now the intelligence is what creates new schemes for material enjoyment. So if there's only the mind without any intelligence, then okay, whatever is easily available, that's what you, okay, this is available, get it. But when the intelligence comes up, Okay, say if somebody has parental control there, and it's okay, within their parental control, then this side I'll visit, I'll watch this, I'll do this, I'll do that. But when the intelligence comes in, okay, how can I bypass the parental control? How can I delete this? Or how can I surf and then I have leave no footprint of that? Now in Australia, they banned social media for teenagers. And within 1 week, the sale of VPN has increased almost 500 times over there. So, what is happening? People are changing their geolocation trackers and they're still accessing all social media. So, the point is that the mind will stay within whatever is experienced and what is available. But the intelligence will create various schemes. That's why Krishna says that Indriyani mano buddhyasyadishtam uchyate. That kama, selfish desire, or basically self-destructive desire, is present in the senses, it's present in the mind, and it is present in the intelligence also. So that's how the idea that the buddhi that is being talked about over here is what expands our mental existence. And that's how it's associated with the mode of goodness. Sorry, mode of passion. One last question. Yes, please.
Yeah. You mentioned that three modes need to be present, like category, 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 and like we should be influenced by some of them, but not be like, but they should be present like equally. Like, can you explain more detail like what it means?
Okay, so what do I mean by presence and influence? Okay. Let's take another example to illustrate this. That when we talk about the world, so when we function, for example, say we consider deities. And the deity is Krishna. Now, is the deity matter? Well, yes, it is made of matter. It could be marble, it could be wood, it could be whatever. Now, normally when we approach the deity, our focus is not on the material it is made of. Our focus is on this is Krishna. It's like currency. If you have 500 rupee note, the currency is paper. But the currency is so much more than paper that the fact that it's paper becomes incidental. That only, okay, it should not get wet, I should not accidentally tear it. For that, I need to be aware. But the fact is that currency, because of being authorized by the government, it has become so much more than paper that we don't treat it like paper. And does it mean that we forget that it's paper? No. If it's going to become wet, we are careful, we don't put currency also. So like that, for the deities, we are careful that if we have wooden deity, we won't bathe them with water. Jagannath deity, for example, we won't bathe them with water directly. We have to be careful about that. But beyond that, this is Krishna. We don't fixate on the fact that the deity is made of particular matter. So now, if a wooden deity is to be fashioned, then, we got some traditional wood, and from that Jagannath is to be made. The sculptor, the Shilpa, they make it. So then, when they make it, these sculptors, they have to have the proper balance. Isn't it? That the wood should be strong enough, the wood should not be weak enough. So whatever is required for a particular statue to stand, to hold itself, if the head is very large and the human body is not proportionately strong enough, then everything will collapse. So whatever is required for functioning, that is required. And now, beyond that is the spiritual side, which is the most important for us. But just because the spiritual side is important, does not mean the functional side has to be neglected. When the devotees had built a Rath cart in London, then the Rath Yatra started in San Francisco, and they had been in America and North America and Mountain other places. The devotees came to UK first, and they decided to do the Rath Yatra over there. And these devotees were young and ambitious. So they said, we will make our Ratha cart bigger than all the other Ratha carts that have been there till now. So they made the Ratha huge in vertical direction. But unfortunately, they didn't make the wheels sufficiently large, proportionately. And they were going on the roads and suddenly the earth collapsed. And now, at that time, nobody knew what the Rath Yatra was. So the devotees presented, the press had come, the media had come, public had come. The devotees presented to everyone as if the collapse of the Rath was a part of the festival. But still, it was a disaster in some ways. So then the devotees wrote to Prabhupada. And they said, Prabhupada, did the Ratha cart collapse because of our poor devotion? And Prabhupada replied, no, it collapsed because of your poor engineering. So what do you mean by that? That the material functional side is important. So like that, if you consider the body and mind, it's a machine. And from a machine's perspective, for its functioning, a certain composition is required. So in that sense, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, all three are functional components of the way the body functions. So if you consider, in the body, there's constant creation, maintenance, destruction happening. Cells are dying, cells are being created, cells are being maintained. So all three needs to go on accordingly. That's from the functional perspective. Now from the moral perspective, what it means is, which is the best way for me to go closer to Krishna? So, when I am making my decisions in life, it is best that I make my decisions when I am Sattva. Then I'll be able to choose wisely, I'll be able to act wisely. That's what we are talking about. So what something is made of and what something is meant for. They're two different questions. So if a deity is made of particular elements, then those elements have to be a proper balance for the deity to exist. The card is to be proper balance. What something is made of and what something is meant for. The deity is meant for us to have a facility by Krishna manifest in this world. And that's what the primary purpose is. So what something is meant for is more important. But what something is made of is not unimportant. If somebody has diabetes and somebody gives them Tirupati Balaji Prasad, a nice big laddu. Say, this is sugar, please don't take this. This is prasad. You take prasad, what is going to happen? Well, the soul will get purified and sugar will get agitated. The insulin will get spiked. So the point is that there's a material dimension which cannot be neglected. So then what do? We may take a small portion, or we may take some non-sweet prasad. We cannot fixate on the material side of things, but we can't completely neglect the material side of things. So that's from the body's functional perspective, the three gunas are that way need to be present. But when we are making decisions, we make our decisions of guna, not in tamoguna, Arjuna. Thank you very much. Shri Prabhupada, Shri Bhagavad Gita.